I really can't remember the last time a Blackhawks game didn't have a penalty called in it. Certainly hasn't been the case this year. I actually just went through Hockey Reference's website, went through the game logs for the last couple of years. I went all the way back until the last time the Blackhawks won a Stanley Cup, so 2015. Because that's where Hockey Reference's data kind of makes it not as easy to see. So I didn't want to spend too much time on it, so that was my cutoff. But since the Blackhawks last won a Stanley Cup, 2015, until now, so 5 years, this is the first time a Blackhawks game has not had a penalty. This was a rare game, and I'm not quite sure how to feel about that stat. It certainly doesn't make me feel any better, that's for sure.
Wow. You have to get up, do what they do. But that was insane. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Come on, I make go records, baby. I'm liking this.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Hawks Recap. My name is Clay. Thank you for tuning in. Blackhawks just completed their 59th game of the season, back end of a back-to-back, last game of a 5-game road trip through Western Canada, 5 games in 8 days, and they complete the bookending losses to the Winnipeg Jets, losing the first game of the road trip to the Jets, and then losing again tonight to the Winnipeg Jets, this time by a score of 3-2. So this ended up being a pretty crappy road trip for the Blackhawks. This was a road trip that they very much needed to do very well in if they wanted to really make a push towards the playoffs, but they just didn't get it done. Now, I would say that they played better than 2 points in 5 games would indicate, but really that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. You either get the points or you don't, and the Blackhawks failed to get the points in these 5 games. They had leads in every single one of these games, and they just failed to get it done. They failed to close it out. They failed to get more than just 2 points. And this game, we all knew that this game was probably going to be the hardest of these 5 games to win. I thought the Blackhawks put up a great fight in this game, but you could tell they were tired. This was the 5th game in 8 days, back end of a back-to-back. They didn't really have enough gas left in the tank to close this one out. Winnipeg Jets were rested for this game, and, well, the Jets also had some pretty decent puck luck on their side as well. All in all, it doesn't help the Hawks, and that's just not what we want. Corey Crawford in net for the Hawks tonight, considering Robin Lehner was in net last night. Crawford was fantastic in this game. He did everything you'd hope for from your goaltender. He saved every shot you'd expect him to stop. He made some big-time stops at some big-time situations, but it somehow wasn't enough. And sometimes that's just hockey. Hawks haven't really had the hockey gods on their side as of late. However, scoring only 2 goals is not really the recipe for winning in this day and age. Hawks failed to do that, failed to provide enough run support for Corey Crawford, and that would be their downfall in this one. However, they would start off strong in this game once again. They've had some really good starts in this road trip. Great first shift once again. Unfortunately, could not find a way to beat Hellebuck in that first shift, but they had a couple of really good looks. But strong first period. They needed it because they knew as this game would go on, their chances of really being strong, skating with the mileage kind of on their legs during this road trip, it was going to be tough. But a strong first period, and, well, they would get rewarded with about 5 minutes left to play. Ryan Carpenter would make a great play in the neutral zone, redirects the puck to spring Patrick Kane on a rush. Kane would take it wide. Carpenter would crash the net. Kane would throw that puck towards the crease, and the puck would go off Ryan Carpenter's shin pad and into the back of the net. Carpenter channeling his inner Andrew Shaw, and the Hawks are up 1-0 going into the second period. Now, the Hawks have had good first periods before. We've witnessed that plenty of times, but we've seen throughout this year that second periods just have not been in the Hawks' favor. Now, last night, obviously, was kind of an anomaly. 7 shots, 4 goals on those 7 shots. That's, yeah, throw that one away. And there's been a couple other games where the Hawks have kind of bucked that trend. But for the most part this year, second period just hasn't been good for the Hawks, and it continued tonight. Hawks really struggled, and I think that's kind of when they started hitting their wall in terms of their legs and their energy and everything. But Winnipeg just started really kind of going after the Hawks in that second period, and they would benefit from it. 6.5 minutes in, they would get a goal, deflected, nothing Crawford could do. A little bit later, it looked like the Jets may have taken the lead. Pretty bad puck luck for the Hawks. Crawford makes a save, puck hits the glass behind, and then bounces back on front. Connor kind of knocks it into the back of the net. However, that goal was officially reviewed and deemed no goal since Connor directed it intentionally into the goal with his kind of hand-ish area. So Hawks catch a break there. However, with about 4.5 minutes left to go in that second period, Winnipeg would for sure get the lead with another deflected goal. Once again, nothing Crawford could do. Coach Colleton would shuffle the lines a little bit right after that goal to try and get some sort of spark at the end of that second period and end up paying off. Kubalik, Taves, Kane on the line. Kubalik takes the puck in, gets it to Taves rushing towards the net, and Taves throws it towards the front of the goal where Patrick Kane is waiting backdoor, and he puts it in and ties this game up. That was a huge goal in this game right at the end of the second period with about a minute left to go. Ties this game up at 2 going into the third period. If the Hawks didn't have their legs in the second period, well, they weren't going to have them in the third period either, and that was pretty much the case. Jets would jump on that a minute and a half in, and they would take the lead for good. Another deflected goal, color me surprised, but this time off of Alex DeBrincat's stick. The puck's just fighting DeBrincat like this entire year. You got to feel for the kid, and being, the game-winning goal in this one, that's got to suck. Now, I was a little surprised that Coach Colleton did not challenge this one for goalie interference because it looked, there was contact. Corey Crawford had contact in the crease area. You could argue that the defender kind of was pushing him in, but he's kind of already in the crease there. To me, that's goalie interference. But I understand why Coach Colleton didn't make the challenge because, well, we saw it already backfire in the first game of this road trip against Winnipeg, where it completely turned the game against the Hawks. But in this one, what's the worst that can happen? You're down a goal already. You get a penalty because the coach is challenged. It would have been the first penalty of the game. And, instead you're just kind of laying over and just going to accept that you're now down a goal when your team is just tired as heck. I don't know. I probably would have challenged it. I thought it would have been worth it, even if you lose the challenge. Even if they deem, because who knows what the NHL calls goalie interference. Even though I thought it was pretty clear interference, who knows what the NHL thinks. But even with that, say the Hawks go on the penalty kill, we get a penalty in this game, which means that probably Hawks get a power play later on in the third, considering that the refs no longer have that, we haven't even called a penalty in this game, so we're just not going to for the rest of the game. There would have already been a penalty. Hawks maybe would have gone to a power play. Now, the Hawks power play hasn't been good. Let's get that out of the way. And I'm not saying the Hawks PK would have, killed this off, but in terms of getting maybe some rest for your guys in the third period, being on a power play, being, up a guy, you don't really have to work as hard during those moments, or you don't have to skate as hard, so you could kind of conserve your legs in that moment. But that's all hypothetical. That's just me kind of trying to get into an alternate reality for this game. Reality of the situation in our world is that Jets are up 3-2, and that would be how this game would end. Now, the Hawks would battle. They would try and score the game-tying goal late in this game, pull the goalie. They had opportunities, but they were gassed. They just didn't have a whole lot left in the tank. And quite frankly, as I mentioned, out of all the games in this road trip, this game was the one that was going to be the hardest for the Hawks to get points out of. Just was. You look at this game in a silo, and I would have been yeah, I'd be all right with a loss. It was really those other 4 games that makes this one sting. Those other 4 games the Hawks really needed to do better on. They needed to get wins in those other 4 games. This one, it sucks because we didn't get the job done earlier, but I'm not really surprised we didn't come out with a point in this game. Fortunately, this road trip is over now, but it was not a good road trip, and it pretty much spelled the end of the Hawks' playoff chances. Now, obviously, they're not eliminated technically. They get to go home now to play the Rangers and the Predators. Those are must-win games if you really still have hope for the playoffs, but then the Hawks have to go on another tough road trip after that. It's tough to see with the results of this road trip. It's tough to see the Hawks making the playoffs. They needed to do better. So, with the trade deadline basically a week away, what does this mean for the Hawks? Well, they're certainly not buyers, if they ever were. I don't think they really ever were, but if they were, they're not anymore. In my opinion, nothing's really changed all that much. Now, I made a trade deadline preview video, and I'll have a link to that in the description. Check that out. For me, nothing's changed really from that video. I laid out some scenarios. One scenario was we did poor on this road trip. Once again, I don't really think we're going to be all that big of sellers. I don't think we're going to make a whole lot of moves during this trade deadline. Maybe we move one player, but I don't see a whole lot of action. I think this is still going to be a pretty quiet deadline for the Hawks. But, once again, they're certainly not buyers, if they ever were. One last note before I end this video. Boqvist was scratched healthily for this game. I was fine with it, honestly. He didn't have a good game last night against Calgary, and he's a rookie. He hasn't played, a 82-game season before. I'm fine with kind of keeping him rested. Seeing the game from up top is a good way to see it, especially for newer players. Plus, it's a chance to get Sealer into the game. See what we can find out about this guy since we picked him off waivers. It doesn't really pay for us to just kind of keep him on the bench and not see what we actually have going into the offseason. Might as well get him in, give Boqvist a little bit of rest coming off a pretty poor defensive performance. Maybe get him re-energized to come back for the next couple games here. So I was fine with that decision. I know some people were kind of pissed off, but it's not really that big of a deal. And with that, I'm going to conclude this video. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Hawks Recap. I hope you got some sort of enjoyment out of it. Like, share, and subscribe. Appreciate that as always. Leave your thoughts down in the comments section below. Let me know what you think of this road trip and maybe what you see the Hawks doing for this trade deadline. Let me know. But with that, stay safe, make good decisions, and I'll see you next time.